Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, and our code is this: to make all things nerdy more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you're going to fall in love with. I'm Dan. I use he, him pronouns.
I'm Jake. I also use he, him pronouns.
And today, we're joined by Joshua Williamson, a New York Times bestselling author who wrote Nailbiter at Image, but he's also written an absolute ton of DC, including Flash, Bats and Soups. Now he's writing Robin and one of the big dogs in Infinite Frontier. How are you?
I am good, and I also use he, him pronouns. But I'm terrific making comic books.
We are very, very excited to have you here. Damian is very close to Jake and I's hearts. The show actually used to be called Super Sons for quite a long time. So very, very happy we got you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, so glad to get to have someone like you with us. So...
Here it comes.
We are pretty hard-hitting journalists, so we do like to open. We like to open with a tough one.
No.
What's your favorite sandwich?
Well, my favorite sandwich versus the sandwich I'm allowed to have. Put it like that. So I don't eat red meat, but I miss red meat dearly. And so my favorite sandwich, I don't know, dude. I feel like I really like a pastrami sandwich. I like a lot of, kind of Italian sandwiches. Like I miss salami, I miss pepperoni, all that stuff. So on the most part, I only eat turkey.
Oh, you can't have salami. I'm sorry.
No. I can't have anything. It's a lot of stuff. Some of it's health related. I figured out that migraines, I had really bad migraines, and I started figuring it out. I kept the food journal for years, and I figured out one day it was red meat. And then I looked it up online, and they were like, the number one, it was after I had pepperoni pizza.
Wait, that's a thing?
And they were like, what's that?
That's a thing? I didn't realize that.
Dude, I looked it up. So we're getting on this whole thing. So the sandwich I eat on the regular is probably just a regular turkey sandwich, man. That's probably it. But there's all other kinds of stuff I like, but that's what I get, turkey sandwiches.
I've been eating a lot of turkey recently since I started working from home, and I'm like making sandwiches all the time for lunch. It's a solid go-to. So with Infinite Frontier, you're kind of one of the architects of the grand scheme of the old DCU as a whole. What do you think thematically sets Infinite Frontier apart from something like Rebirth or something super drastic like New 52?
Well, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head when it comes to New 52. I mean, New 52 is such a, how do I put this? It was New 52 was New 52, right? Like, it was this thing that kind of wiped away, and they were trying to start fresh, but there was a lot of like half measures in there. It was like stuff was our freshest, but it wasn't. And that just created more confusion in some cases. That's what New 52 was. It was definitely this start of something new kind of thing. And then Rebirth, I remember when Rebirth was getting announced, the promos of Rebirth was like, it's not a reboot, right? And it never was. That was like the tag, was it's not a reboot, it never was. And I think Rebirth was about looking at like what was missing. And looking at like the ideas of hope and heart and family and legacy and trying to get that stuff back. To me, what Infinite Frontier is like, listen, we got it back. It's all here. All that stuff is back. All the continuity is back. That hope and that heart is here. Cool. Let's move forward. It's all about going forward. It's like, let's acknowledge all those things that happen. Let's acknowledge the continuity that we love, all these things that we think are great. And now let's tell new stories. Let's start to take this into a new chapter. And that's really what Infinite Frontier Zero was about. It's like, let's get going in the new. I mean, for me, I talk about this a lot when we talk about Infinite Frontier. And you know, we're not going to hit it every time, but when I was a kid and I started reading DC Comics, I was going and getting my shops from like Costco or Target, whatever, right? But when I started becoming really addicted to DC Comics was around like 92, 93. And one of the things that was really great about that time was there was so much new stuff happening, right? And it was like new characters and new versions of these characters. And you look at something like Tim Drake had been around for maybe 2 years at that point, but it's like Tim Drake is a new Robin. There's a new Green Lantern with Kyle. There's Bart was showing up. And then you had Superboy. There were 4 different new Supermen at one point, right? And it's like John Paul Valley is going to be Batman, and then there was all this stuff happening, all these new things. And I think for me, as part of what made me such a hardcore DC person, was I got to come in at a time when they were basically saying like, let's bring all this new stuff in, right? You had Connor Hawk coming in, you had all these new things at the same time, and that really what made me love it. And I think when you look at New 52, they got rid of a lot of it. And you look at some of the stuff, even with Rebirth, where it was about bringing back all this older stuff back, which is great. And I'm happy because I love that older stuff. But I want the new as well. And I want those new things, those new point of views. And I feel like that's what was important to me with Infinite Frontier, was being like, cool, it's all here. All the stuff we love, it's here. It's great. I'm happy. Let's get going with some of that new stuff and bring these new characters in, which is where you see things like John becoming Superman. You get like Yara, there's just stuff going on with Tim Fox, all those things. We're bringing all these new characters back in. And then, that's what Infinite Frontier is to me, is really just about saying like, all that stuff you love is here. It's still there. I promise you it's still there. Let's get going with new stuff and new chapters for these characters. That's really what Wonder Woman is saying throughout that whole book, is just kind of about, she's witnessing everyone starting new chapters of their lives, all these characters. But the twist of that, of course, is Darkseid, and him being like, that's great that everyone's starting new chapters, but that just means you're getting closer to the end of the book. And it always ends with me. I'm always the end of the book. And that's what Infinite Frontier, the Zero, was trying to say. And that's a little bit about what we're playing with some of the stuff over the next 2 years. It's about those ideas.
It feels like you read my next question, because the big stinger is Darkseid. And he came back at the end of Infinite Frontier 1, spoilers. When you're writing Darkseid, when you're writing his dialogue, do you feel you lean more into the bombastic Kirby style, or are you trying to capture something like that that darkness of him?
I will admit that Darkseid's voice took me a minute, because I had written him before when I started writing Justice League Odyssey originally, and I kind of struggled with capturing his voice. And also, he had gone through such a weird thing, and he wasn't really himself, right? Because it was like he had gone through the whole thing where he was a baby and then he was a teenager or whatever, and so it was a hard time grasping who he was. Recently, obviously, I was going back and looking at a lot of Jack Kirby stuff and thinking more about what his voice sounded like. I feel like it's somewhere in the middle at this point. It's somewhere a little bit of, obviously, I think the stuff Grant did with Rock of Ages is probably closer in terms of voice that I'm thinking in there. And it's really, hold on a second. I'm gonna grab my dog. Come here, puppy. Come here, puppy. She's getting antsy. So, with Darkseid, it's sort of a mix of things, but in the process of building the plans, and this does get into spoiler territory, so I might refrain from kind of getting too deep into this, but Darkseid is a really fascinating character to me, and because of Justice League Odyssey, I've already kind of had this like entry point into him on a like working level, like writing level, but in a way of finding my way into Darkseid, doing more and more research on them as a character and going back and reading a lot of their early appearances and reading some of the mythology and trying to understand who Darkseid is, I was able to find their voice. And I'm not sure if that voice will be necessarily Jack Kirby's or being, this kind of Shakespearean bombastic thing. But I do feel as though the way I'm writing Darkseid now, I'm not sure to explain it. I don't know. I hear his voice now in a way that I never had before. Like I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about another writer. He's a co-writer on Future State Gotham with me. I was talking to him about Darkseid, and we were talking about the things that Darkseid is actually obsessed with, right? And who Darkseid is. And in the process of that conversation, I literally was like, I understand Darkseid now more than I ever have, just by having some of these conversations about him. So
I'll hit you with another follow-up. With Darkseid, it's the AntiLife Equation. Now, the AntiLife Equation changes of what it does sort of from writer to writer to book. What does the AntiLife Equation mean to you? Like, what is that power? What does it mean?
Well, it's interesting to say this. It's about control. Like, the AntiLife Equation is about control. And control it, but it's more than controlling people. It's about controlling life. It's about controlling because life is about, you're supposed to be free and have freedom and possibilities and all this stuff, which is why it's interesting about Infinite Frontier is this idea of the future is now limitless. Like, all these possibilities are limitless, right? The AntiLife Equation is the opposite of that. It is not limitless. It is one thing, and that one thing is controlled. And that's why I think Darkseid wants it so badly, is because Darkseid is obsessed with control. Like, everything about Darkseid is about having control. And that's what the AntiLife Equation is. Darkseid is just, it's about, and to me as well, is a thing that can be used to control people, control reality, control things. I mean, because it is weird, AntiLife Equation, you know, you talk to some, if you look at some stuff, they don't exactly say what it is. They're just like, oh no. Or it's some kind of weird, just like power source. And it's like, no, it isn't just like this magical thing you can just grab and all of a sudden you have the power to blast lasers out of your hands or your eyes or whatever. It's much more than that. And for Darkseid, it's about control and controlling. But even then, it's still bigger than just controlling people. It's just about these ideas of having absolute control of everything around him. That is what Darkseid wants. That's what he feels the AntiLife Equation can give him.
So with Infinite Frontier, the new miniseries, a couple of the covers have come out. And on one of them, so there's two characters I've been obsessed with since I was young, and no one other than me I ever thought really gave a shit about them. And it's Resurrection Man and Cameron Chase. And you're writing Chase.
I love that you mentioned Resurrection Man, though. I actually, one of the earliest books I tried to pitch to DC was a Resurrection Man book, like back like almost 10 years ago. I was trying, this is before Resurrection Man was in New 52. I was pitching them like hard on it. And then obviously they did Resurrection Man. And then I saw Resurrection Man was in one of the feature state books. And it just made me really happy just to see him there. So I love Resurrection Man. I love Mitch. But Chase is a character I've always really liked. I honestly, I have to like be completely honest. I don't remember why I put Chase at Infinite Frontier. I feel as though, like, I don't remember the onset of it. I think it was just like I knew I wanted to write that character. Usually anytime I have a character in a book, it's because I wanted to write them. Like, I'm obsessed with the characters, right? You know, that's why I like Ravagers and Robin. Is like, freaking love Ravager. Connor Hawk is Robin. Love Connor Hawk, right? So it's like, selfishly, when people ask me, and they're like, why are these characters here? I'm like, are you asking a thematic story reason, or just me being obsessed with that character?
I feel that.
And that's the thing about Chase. Like, I really liked Chase back in the original series, back in the 90s. I remember that book. I thought it was really interesting. And then I always liked their appearances after that and the different stuff they were in. I know they were in Supergirl during Rebirth. And then Bendis had Chase in some of his Superman stuff. But I think that once I knew that Bones was going to play a very important part of Infinite Frontier, I was like, well, if I'm using Bones, I have to have Chase. Like, I can't have one without the other, is how I kind of felt about it. And then what's weird is that, like, my favorite scene, I shouldn't say my favorite scene, but one of my favorite scenes of the first issue of Infinite Frontier is literally just Chase and Bones talking at a cafe. Like, I love it. And then issue 2 is all from Chase's point of view, pretty much. Like, each issue is kind of this like narrative mystery that we're building. It's very much like 52 was, where it was like all these different story threads that are combined. That's how the Infinite Frontier mini is. And Chase is kind of a grounded point of view of how crazy the DCU has gotten. And like, there's in that scene, Bones makes a comment where he's like, do you remember when things were less weird? And Chase is like, you have a skull for a head. Like,
he also has a cyanide touch.
Yeah. Well, she's like, listen, we're in a restaurant and nobody cares. You have a skull for a head. Like, we're way past things being weird, you know? And Bones is upset about that. He's like, I don't like it. And, you know, so with Chase, like, I hear her voice really well. And issue 2 is kind of her, like, issue 2, she's interrogating Superman and Batman about essentially death metal, Doomsday Clock, Rebirth, New 52. She's just kind of like, yo, so reality was messed with for a few years. What happened? And they're like, we took care of it. And she's like, nah, that's not going to do it. Like, she literally said, she's like, the Justice League took care of it isn't an answer anymore. Like, people want to know. Like, people want to know what really happened. And so she's awesome to write. I really like writing her. So she's an important part of the book, and kind of her point of view on things is very, obviously she's cynical, but she's asking the questions that I don't think people ask a lot of times. You know, it's like she basically boils it down for them, where she's like, you're telling me that like this person from an alternate reality messed with time, and that caused this person to mess with time, and then this dude came around. And there's a part where she's just like, so you're telling me that an evil Batman from another world took over Gotham, and then another evil Batman from another world came here and tried to like rewrite reality. Like, and then she looks at Superman and she's like, when does the evil version of you show up and mess things up? Like, there's a lot of those kinds of questions that she's asking to the characters, and that we don't normally see. Like, we don't really see somebody just straight up be like, what do you mean? Like, reality was messed with? Like, that's a big deal. We should be talking about it. You guys can't just
brush that on. Yeah, you can't brush that under the rug.
Yeah. So Chase is interesting. I really, I like writing her a lot. I was actually rereading her series last night. Just to mine it again for little pieces of information with her to kind of play with and stuff. But I feel like I have her voice pretty well in my head.
I was reading the trade of it the other day because I got it back from Jake from my parents after all these years, and it's just like, I love this, and it's got some J.H. Williams art for like early, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Because
so
she's an important part in Batwoman too, but
yeah. Well, I think that time period was really cool because you had books like that. You know, we had like Use of Resurrection Man was a little bit earlier. You had things like Hitman was in there. Like all these cool books that were a little different, a little experimental. And I think there's a few things like that are coming down the pipe with DC stuff that I think is cool. Like, it doesn't have to always be. I know there's a lot of Batman books, but it doesn't have to always be Batman books. You know, we can have occasionally a Chase. Like, we can have a book that's a little bit, I don't say different.
Batman keeps the lights on.
I don't know. Yeah, for sure. I mean, walk into a Target and walk down an aisle and you're like, cool, there's a whole Star Wars section. There's a whole Marvel section. And then there's a Batman section.
There's one shelf that's dedicated to Superman. Just the one.
Yeah. Maybe
if you have a good Target.
You're like...
So, the Department of Extra-Normal Operations got hit pretty hard during Event Leviathan, along with all the other shady orgs, but I don't care about them. But... in Infinite Frontier Secret Files, Bones is back with the DEO. Are they going to be having a big part in your work, or are they going to be back in the DCU at large?
They're back in the DCU, but they're definitely back in a very underground way. I mean, essentially, Bones says what happened. Once the multiverse got reset at the end of Death Metal, people looked around and were like, that thing that just happened can never happen again. This idea that somebody from the multiverse came here and almost destroyed everything, that whole thing can never happen again. And Bones is the one that like basically raises his hand and is like, I can help with that. Because when you look at Bones' history, he's always had this kind of aversion to the other, right? He's always been like, I don't like metahumans. I don't like aliens. And now it's, I don't like the multiverse. I don't like that that's a thing. And I don't think that something like the Batman Who Laughs should ever happen again. Like, nobody from the multiverse should be coming here causing problems. And there's a scene, I'm like totally getting to spoiler stuff here. So in the Secret Files, I won't say the exact name of the character, but in the Secret Files, he's interviewing somebody about Death Metal. And he's like, in Death Metal, you were transformed into this other thing. Do you remember? And they're like, no, I don't remember any of that. Like, I don't remember being that thing. And he's like, okay. And the person becomes that thing again while he's talking to them. Like, he activates something and turns him into that thing. And then he's just like, he basically stops it. But he's like, this is proof, man. You see this? This isn't cool. Like, we can't go through things like Doomsday, Death Metal, and Metal and all this stuff and think there's not going to be repercussions. Like, you can't sit here and tell me the multiverse got reset and everything is cool. Like, it's not cool. And that's what Bones is coming from. Like, he basically raises his hand and is like, listen, like, you're telling me there was like an army of evil Batman and we're just going to be like, cool, it's over. Nothing ever came of that and everything is fine and the world is completely cool. So Bones basically is like, that's what the DAO is kind of about, is investigating the multiverse. And because this thing happened, he's able to get the money to do it. He's able to basically go off the books underground and be like, I'm rebuilding the DAO by myself. I have this thing. And gradually you'll see what that actually is and like what it's up to and what his plans are. And of course, bringing in Chase is part of it. And she hates him, but she understands what he's saying, right? Like, she hates him, but she's like, you're right. That is a problem.
So with Bones and Chase, the way they left off was shit. Like, they're not ever.
Are you talking about Supergirl? I mean, yeah, she was like running him down in the streets.
So, like, how much has their dynamic changed since then?
I mean, they still hate each other. I mean, he literally shows up when she's on vacation. He just shows up. And she's like, what are you doing here? What the hell? And he's like, what's going on? And he lays it out for her. But they have this kind of antagonistic relationship of hate for each other, and then we'll eventually get deeper into it of you know, it is not an easy, they're not friends. But like, it isn't an easy relationship where they just dive right back into being like, all right, we're cool with each other. Let's go. It's like, no. But she also understands that if something happened of this magnitude that put Bones back into power, she has to kind of play ball until she figures out what's going on. And that is sort of part of the story is about Chase also trying to piece together what actually is happening, because she also knows, and this will come up later in the series, but she also is aware that whatever Bones is up to, he's lying on some level, right? He's not telling the whole truth on some level, and so she can't just ignore it. She has to look at it and then see what it is he's actually lying about. And that's gonna be part of the story, is her trying to figure that stuff out. So she's a major part of the book.
I mean, so happy.
It's not all for her point of view, but I mean, yeah, she's in 1 and 2, and she has definitely a very big role across the series without getting too much into spoilers.
So she's
not the Black Lantern, though.
Oh yeah,
tell you that.
See, when I saw Chase, I was more excited about that than like a new mystery. I was just like, oh, she's back. That's all that matters. And then.
But she was in Superman
in a prominent role, and then I got to see Mitch Drawler, which was like the best. I wish I had Mitch drawing money so I could buy that cover, but I'm gonna hand it over to Jake.
So I actually I have one. I mean, just putting Bones in with 2 members of Infinity Inc. along with Chase, you're just fuel.
Well, here's the thing to think about is that, again, this is the way it's interesting. Like, we're showing all this art that has them all together, but it's different stories. So it's like Chase and Bones are over here, Jade, Obsidian, and Alan are here. Then you have President Superman with Justice Incorporated over here. Or I'm sorry, it's Justice Incarnate over here. And then you have Roy on his adventure, and you have Flash on his adventure, Barry Allen, right? And so you have these 5 story threads that gradually will combine. Like, they're all investigating different things, and they're all piecing together this puzzle. So it's going to be a while before you see Bones in a room with Jade and Obsidian. But again, now I'm starting to go on a path of spoilers.
I'm just
But listen, he does not like them either, just to frame it. He definitely is not a fan of the Infinity characters, or frankly, anybody. I mean, he's not a fan of anybody. But he definitely doesn't like the JSA. He definitely doesn't like Infinity Inc. He definitely doesn't like.
Does he like anyone? Does he have any friends?
Just a cigar.
I think so.
That's sad. A lot of.
I mean, I think in the Secret Files, the writers in the Secret Files, they kind of gave him like an assistant that he seems to at least talk to, and I think that's fun. He at least has an assistant that he can talk to.
That poor person.
Yeah. Oof. Just keeps getting smoke blown in his face. As our first Flash writer on the show, I have to ask, what do you think makes Wally West such an endearing character that has cemented himself in the heart of fans?
I think because you got to see him grow up. It's very similar to the Dick Grayson stuff. I think getting to see him grow up and kind of take the mantle and then being able to kind of run with it after that, and then being able to run out of Barry's shadow. I think being able to see that process, even if you weren't seeing it in real time, if you were reading it later, you still got to see the process on the page. And I think that's what did it, because you got to see this person kind of go, and he's evolved as a character. You know, I was talking about this earlier this morning. Like, he was such a drastically different character in Titans, and it's like when you go and see how he changed from Titans through his own run once he was the Flash, and then once Mark Waid came in, Mark Waid really took Wally and kind of started, you know, running with him and make him what we have, right? And it's like all the ups and downs, the stuff with Linda, and then once you get to the Jeff stuff, and Jeff was able to kind of continue some of that. I think that's part of why so many fans sort of gravitate to him, you know?
Yeah, you really got to see just like, oh, he's kind of arrogant and like kind of a jerk when he was in the Titans. And then you get to the point where he's a father and he's like, yeah, no, these are my children. Don't touch them. He got to grow.
It's important. Yeah, I wanted to write way more of Wally and Flash. When I initially pitched the Flash book, you know, it was like almost 6 years ago now. When I initially pitched it, you know, Rebirth wasn't even a thing. There was no Rebirth when I originally pitched for Flash. And so that's why I was Barry, and I pitched all this stuff for Barry, and that's what got approved. I actually didn't know. I came into the office for a story meeting with DC where we basically mapped out the first 8 issues of Flash. And we outlined it out pretty tight. I knew what I was writing. I went home, I wrote the first issue. I was starting to write the second issue, and then I got the phone call, and they were like, by the way, Wally's coming back, so you get to have an issue 9. And I was like, oh my God, 9? Like, there's so many issues in it. But then I kind of forgot there was Double Ship. But then it was like, after that, it was like, well, he's in Titans. Titans is his book, so you don't get to have him. And I would constantly argue. And speaking of, like, we were talking about the whiteboards earlier, it's like I had all these whiteboards that were full of plans for the Flash, and I would always try to sneak Wally into them. I mean, I was trying to sneak everybody. I was trying to get Bart. I was trying to get Max and Jesse and everybody in there all the time. But Wally was the one, and I would always get shot down. Where I'd be like, "All right, here, you're cool. Wally's going to be in this arc. Like, he'll be in the Button, or he'll be in Running Scared." I kept trying to get him in there, and they would shoot me down. It wasn't until I pitched them Flash War that they were like, "Oh, well, if you're doing Flash War, that means Wally has to be in the book." And I'm like, "Great." Issue 39. Well, isn't Flash Force starting at 47? I'm like, issue 39. So they finally let me have him, and you know, every time I got to work on him, I would put him in there. But you know, I got him in these little spurts because of things, and then you know, getting to have him back for Speed Metal and getting to finally, I felt like really kind of resolve some of the emotional stuff, and it was really important to me because I had laid out this conflict between him and Barry through 39 through 51, basically, and using the Flash War stuff, I had established this conflict, and I was like, listen, I cannot leave this book until I resolve that conflict. Like, I cannot leave without Wally and Barry basically having a handshake and being like, you know what, we did it, we're cool. Like, and so we were getting closer and closer, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that. And then we were able to make it work. Like, we were able to get him. I was able to make Speed Metal happen, and I was able to have a lot of freedom with Speed Metal because Speed Metal was part of Death Metal, and we had some more freedom with Death Metal. I was able to really just kind of get in there and tell the exact story I wanted with Wally and try to get him just back, man. But yeah, resolve the stuff between Barry and Wally. It was really important to me. I'll write him again someday.
I can't wait.
It was kind of funny because I had all these. There was other things we had talked about that I wanted to do with him, with Wally. But when it came time to make a decision on who was going to join Justice Incarnate, I was like, well, it makes sense because it's Barry. Like, it made sense because of Barry, who Barry was, and his, you know, the fact that Barry is like the first person to cross worlds when he did Flash of Two Worlds and met Jay. It made sense for him to be the one to explore the multiverse. But that also gave an opportunity for Wally to go and be the Flash in the main book for a while. Spoilers, but that's what happens. You know, you can see the solicits are out. You know what's going on. But that was, yeah. So I'm glad that Wally's kind of back here, and I think some of the stuff we have planned for Wally and Barry will be cool. We're going to keep them apart from each other, which is what, you know, Wonder Woman says in the special Zero. she talks to the Spectre about how it's like, they finally come back together. Now they have to go down different roads again. But that just means we'll bring them back together in a cool way.
That gives you some room to do something big.
Yeah, I think it's rough sometimes as a creator because it's like, and I over the years, I've had these conversations with people at conventions, and it's rough because, like, a lot of times the readers they just don't know what I know. So it's like allows me to be more relaxed about it, I guess, because I'm like, I know I can separate Barry and Wally because I know I'm going to bring them back together. I know exactly how and when. You know what I mean? Or if you're a reader, you're like, oh, I can't believe they separated again. It's like, they'll come back together.
Before we get on to Robin, I did want to make a note so our listeners don't attack me. When we said that you're the first Flash writer, we also spoke to Marv Wolfman, so I didn't want anybody to jump on me.
That's cool. I have only spoken to Marv Wolfman maybe like 2 or 3 times. Me and Tom King had dinner with him when the Titans premiere. We went to New York for the con, and they did a premiere of the first episode of Titans. And then after it was over, that was really cool because they brought, they put Marvel on stage and they really like celebrated him of being this voice for the Titans. And then we all they had this like really, really fancy dinner. It was funny because they had a sectioned off where all like the actors are over here, and then it was just like a bunch of comic creators on their table. But that's when I saw Marv, and I actually need to talk to him. I want to pick his brain about some things. But Marv is the
great. Kindest.
Oh, he's
person. Like, the best thing about him is that when we asked about like the characters that he created and what he thinks of them now, he's not bitter in a single way. He is so cool about like everyone will interpret the things he's created differently, and is like super supportive, and he loves it. So it was nice to hear an older creator do that, where I know a lot of them are kind of don't like modern comics.
Is stuffy about it? Oh, that's weird. I know that's true. I know. I don't know. Comics are cool when they kind of evolve and change, and you put this thing out in the world, and that's really what you're doing as a creator anyway. Like, you put this thing. I think it's like David Lynch talks about this, where he's just like, I don't want to talk about the book. The book is me talking about the movie. Like, he doesn't want to talk about the movie because the movie isn't talking about the movie. I feel like once you put it out there into the world, it's magic. You people interpret it differently, and they come at it from different points of view, and that's great. And I think that when you're creating these new characters and creating these stories, you have to be able to kind of separate yourself from it and just kind of let it live, right? And I think it's a testament to how great the core of a character is if it can continue to live on beyond you, and people are able to grab it and build upon what you did. Like, that's so cool, and Marv did a lot of that, obviously. Right, dog.
What's the dog's name?
Cordelia.
Nice.
She's old. She's almost 16. She is deaf, and she's almost blind in one eye. Has some health issues. Yeah, she's lived a long life. She's basically been. I've had her since she was like 7 weeks old, and she basically is in my office every day. So she's been my sidekick for a long time. She's just a little puppy.
She knows all the secrets.
My little old lady.
She knows them all.
Yes, she has seen it all. I always wish I could talk to her and be like, what do you think is happening? Because it's like, our life is so different 16 years ago that I'm just like, I mean, I have 2 kids, and she's probably just like, who are these monsters that live with us now? What happened?
Where did these gremlins come from?
So I wish I could
What
talk
did you do?
Yeah, I wish I could talk to her about
it. What did you do?
Yeah, I wish I could talk to her about it and just be like, what do you think is happening here exactly? And like, we lived in so many different houses. We grew up I grew up in California, so she's from California. But we live in Portland, Oregon now. So I'm like, we lived in different houses. Obviously I've had different relationships. It's like, my life is drastically different. Again, drastically different from the way it was 16 years ago. So I'm always like, what do you think is going on? Like, what do you think has happened? Anyway, comic books.
Comic books. Comic books. So Robin introduces new characters to the DC universe. What was the collaborative process with Gleb and you for developing them?
So, when we started putting the book together, I knew I wanted to do a bunch of new fighters. I didn't want to just use all classic fighters. And I felt like some of those characters, I've seen these stories from them. And so I kind of wanted to mix things up. And so one of them was I wanted to make new characters. So what I did was I went and I made a list of all the fighter characters in the DCU, all the ones I was interested in working on, and the ones I felt made sense logically for this story, because part of it is like you only can be invited to the island, and you can only be invited if you're willing to do certain things, and if they feel like you fit the certain thing they want from their fighters. So then I made a huge list of all these new characters, and so one of them was Flatline, and she was called something different before, and she was actually the top of the list of new characters. And one I was already excited by about what I kind of had this idea in my head of. And so I sent the list to Gleb. And Gleb and I are already talking about stuff. Gleb and I are very much on the same page. We have a lot of the similar ideas on comics, and we both love a lot of the same things. And I think Robin, it's wild. Like, Robin is a book that is, how do I explain this? I don't know. It's weird when you're working with an artist. You can tell you're both like nailing it. You both know exactly what you want from it. And you know exactly what kind of book you want it to be. Like, we both wanted it to be this very manga influence, like Naruto sort of comic. And so I gave him my kind of list of what I wanted. And he took the list, and one of them was Flatline. And he did a design for her. And from that design came everything. Her personality, like, just the moment I looked at the design, I'm like, I know who this character is. I can hear her voice. Her name is Flatline, because he drew the logo. And I was like, her name is Flatline. This is who she is. Immediately knew who she was. I made changes to issue 2 because of it. Like, issue 1 was already been written. But I went in, I changed some dialogue for her in 1. I made a huge change to 2 because of her. I just all of a sudden knew who she was. And I was like, I remember I showed it to James, and James was like, son of a bitch. Like, that's a cool look. I wish it was mine. I wish that was a Batman character. He was like, ah. And then we showed it to a group. We have the back group has a monthly meeting where all the back writers and a few of the artists, we all get together on a Zoom call, and we talk about a bunch of the stuff. And we talked about Flatline. We showed her designs, and everybody was like, that's cool. And then after that, like, this is actually really silly. I did not. Okay, how do I put this? So with Gleb, I gave him this list of fighters, and I'm like, just go for it. You know, and he was like, well, I don't want to just do copies of things. And I'm like, I'm not saying that. Like, just go have fun. And one of the characters, it took me a while. I completely forgot about it. And then I was reading issue 2, like doing the proofing of it. And I saw this character in the background. And I'm like, man, that character has like really huge hand. What's that about? Is that a weird like art thing that Gleb like messed up, and that character has a huge fist? And then I went and I looked at issue 1. And I'm like, that character's in the background again. They have a huge fist. What's that about? And then I remembered, I'm like, oh my God, I told him one of the characters' names was Johnny Fist. and he drew Johnny Fist. I didn't know. I never saw the design. He drew Johnny. He's basically Johnny Cash with a giant hand. So, but that's in the background is Johnny Fist. And I was like, oh my God, amazing. Like, stuff like that it was a fun discovery for me. But, you know, he has fun with them. And so, he went back and forth. And then with like Respawn, that was in the notes as well. And we went back and forth. Actually, there was never any back and forth. It was very much like, this is what I'm thinking. Respawn, I was like, listen, it's Deathstroke's costume, but it's black and red. And he was like, okay, I got that. And then he did this cool design. And we're talking about, we both like a lot of 90s comics. So we were talking about 90s comics and like image books and being big and bombastic. And we were both are big fans of Cliffhanger. And so we're talking about, not the movie, but the publishing line. So we're talking about like Crimson, because you can see a lot of the stuff in Gleb's art too, the influence of like Roberto Ramos and Joe Mad and Chris Machado and, J. Scott Campbell, like that whole Cliffhanger crew. And that's where Spawn came from. We were like, he looks like a character that would be from that era. So it was a lot of just back and forth of us just like bullshitting about stuff. And then he usually nails it on the first try pretty much. Like I think with Flatline, the only change that came to Flatline, I was like, oh, put bones on her suit. And he was like, you mean like Black Parade? And I'm like, hell yeah, like Black Parade. So that's why she has the bones on her costume. And awesome. So that's where
amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Now you mentioned Naruto, so I gotta bring up Naruto. My biggest accomplishment in life is getting Dan to watch Naruto. So I gotta ask, why would you look at this and be like, you know what, we gotta inject some Naruto? And what was your
I don't know where. So I'm a Naruto fan. I know he is too. He's much more of a manga fan than I am. I hadn't read manga as much as I was in like the early 2000s when Tokyo Pop was like really popping, and I was really reading a lot of that stuff. Like, my favorite that time period is probably a cliche, but I really liked Battle Royale back then. And reading, it was a manhwa called Priest was one that I really enjoyed, but I was reading at a comics or a Tokyo Pop was going off. And so I was reading a lot of stuff then. I don't know when I started reading Naruto and then watching Naruto. I think around 2008. That feels wrong. But I started watching a while ago, and I was actually starting to rewatch it. It's fun. I'm rewatching and reading it at the same time, which is interesting. Since I started working on this, I don't know. I think I just was like, we were talking about him as a character, what we want to do different. I didn't want to ignore what had happened in the past. Like we were talking before with Infinite Frontiers, it's all about acknowledging, respecting, and honoring the past and then moving forward. So we're looking at all of that, and then I was like, I think it'd be really fun. It was a conversation with editors on the phone. I was like, I think it'd be really fun to do like a tournament. And they were like, yes, that sounds really cool. And then I basically wrote this pitch and his ideas for it. And I think in the process of thinking about it being a tournament, I was just looking at stuff, and then I started going down this hole of like Naruto. Like I didn't pin it on him immediately, but I think just kind of going through the process of looking at things. And then like Flash was a different kind of book because Flash was a double ship book. It has to be moved at a certain pace. It always has to be moving quickly. It was a superhero book, obviously the rebirth DNA. And then, the influences of Mark and Jeff that were on that book are so evident, right? On my Flash run. Like it's clearly like a sequel.
Yeah, it's a big love letter to them.
It is, yes, exactly right. At times I feel, too much. Like I think I was too precious about it at times, and I think that's a flaw of the book for sure. But so with that, I was thinking about those things of like what I want to do differently. And I was like, with this book, I want the pacing to be much slower. And I was like, I really want to have that kind of pacing that I think good manga has. And so we started talking about that, and that's where I think some of the Naruto stuff came in. And then I wanted to start talking to Gleb about it, and Gleb was like, I'm running with that. Like he took it and ran. And like the manga page, it was in issue 1. I came up with that idea. I was like, I really think that Damian reads manga, but he doesn't read fighting manga. He reads romance comics. And I remember I wrote it in the script, and I was like, I'm going to get a phone call about this. I know it. Like somebody in editorial is going to be like, what are you talking about? And I did.
Yes.
They were like, we don't know. Like, what are you trying to do here? Is it just like a whole page of manga? Like all of a sudden, cool. They were like, can we make it where he's like reading the manga and all this stuff? And I'm like, no, literally listen to me. Like the whole page is the page of a manga, and then Damian is in the bottom right corner. And this is like, can you have like Alfred off panel? Like that's fine. We can do that. And then I drew like a rough of it and made like a really rough of it. And I sent the script over to Gleb, and then Gleb was like, holy shit, I love this. I'm doing it. And he got it too. He was like, this is exactly right. Like, you're right. He would not want to like read action fighting manga. He would totally want to do a romance manga. Like that fits his character. It kind of reminds me, it's a really silly way of saying this, so please forgive me. Maybe it's okay. In the Watchmen comics, they don't have superhero comics, or superhero comics are not popular because superheroes are real, so they read pirate comics, right? I'm like, in the DCU, Damian does not read superhero comics or fighting comics because he is a superhero and he does fighting. Instead, he reads romance comics. Like, and I feel like it fits his personality, but it also gave me like a narrative opportunity to kind of say some of the things that are going on in the book and things that are happening with Damian in a different way. I don't want to do a lot of captions in this because the Flash book was so much internal monologue with Barry, which is built into the DNA of a Flash book. I remember I asked Mark Waid about it at dinner one time when I just started writing the Flash. I was like, dude, the captions are everywhere, man. Like, because it's a thing that everyone who works in the Flash, there's always a ton of captions in it. And he's like, yeah, he's by himself. He's running super speed, so there's always gonna be captions. So once I got away with that, once I finished Flash, I was like, I really don't want to write captions for a while. Like I don't do it in my creator own books. I don't do it in Birthright or Nailbiter. I did in Ghosted a little, but the further I can get away from it and try something different without, and that's what in Robin, there's no thought captions. There's no thought captions in Infinite Frontier. And anything else I'm working on right now, I think I'm probably forgetting something that will have captions in it, but that made it so for me to kind of express some of these internal monologue kind of things in a very different way. And that's what the manga stuff allowed me to do. And it plays a part throughout the book. You'll see more of the manga stuff as we go. It's not a real manga, though. It's a manga I made up.
No, it doesn't need to be real. It's real enough for me. I do expect to see this in real life, though, eventually.
I think we're in a really cool spot because the guy who is the group editor for Batman, his favorite comic of all time is Akira. And I think you can see it in the Bat books. And obviously James loves Akira as well. You can see it. And so is Jorge. Jorge Jimenez is very influenced by My Hero Academia. And so you can see a lot of these influences. And, I think if we're going to get away with something like that, now would probably be the time. I mean, that's why that Gotham Future State book is in black and white, because we're just like, let's do something different and kind of make it not like a ripoff of manga at all, but just like play with those ideas, I guess. Fun with it. Yeah, exactly.
So Damian is still in pain from Alfred's death. Without giving too much away, do you think the character he's a character to work through something like that through this tournament, or is it something he's going to need to face with words?
There's a scene in issue 5 that kind of talks about what you're talking about. I don't want to get too into spoilers, but he has a conversation with somebody where he talks about it. Like it'll get obvious once the covers come out, because issue 4 has Raish on the cover and issue 5 has other people on the cover, and you'll kind of piece together who he's going to talk to. But he does talk about it with somebody and talk about, he saw it happen.
He had to witness that from across a table.
Yeah, and this is a character who has a relationship with death. And, that's part of the meta-ness of someone like Flatline, who looks the way she looks and has the powers that she has and all that stuff. He has this relationship with death. It's part of why we ended the first issue the way we did. And there's stuff coming in the book you'll kind of piece together that this is about his relationship with death and how his outlook on death changed when Alfred died and being able to deal with that. And so he talks about that a bit in issue 5. And then you'll see kind of the lessons he learned as the arc goes on, because the arc is long. Like, that was one of the things that was important to me, was I didn't want to rush anything. So every issue kind of, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious people think of it because it's monthly, so it's like, I was like, I'm going to say this and I hope you forgive me, but like the actual tournament itself doesn't start until issue 6. So it's paced very slowly.
Well, and, I mean, you're going to have to build up to something the way that issue 1 ends. You're gonna have
yeah. I mean, it's issue 2 is funny. Like issue 2, I make sure every issue has cool stuff in it, but it's definitely a slower.
I just love the fact that he Piccolo's his cape.
So,
he yanks it off. Yeah, it's good. I'm not as hardcore on stuff.
That's that's a visual thing. Yeah.
No, but I'll say this though. So back to the manga stuff, like my editor, Paul Kavinsky, he is a huge Dragon Ball Z fan. So he constantly brings up Dragon Ball Z in our meetings. So,
the tournament doesn't start till issue 6. And was that something you got pushed? And I'm really interested in that because it gives you a lot more time to build out these characters and their relationships. There was no pushback on something like that?
What are you gonna do,
dude?
No, I mean, you'll see. Listen, they're still fighting. They're still sparring. They're still prep. I mean, it's like when you watch something like Karate Kid. It's like the first Karate Kid movie, not the show, but there's a build to a tournament. Even the show, there's a build to the tournament, right? Like, and so I want to spend time with these characters and spend time with them and see kind of what his training is like to get there and it's tough without getting this.
Yeah, you just want to get you want to get the punching in, but constructively.
Yeah, there's punching in every issue. I think I actually realized 4. Now that we're talking about 4, has no punching in it. 4 is probably the only one that has no punching in it. But the rest of them all have punching. There's fights in every issue. But you'll see in issue 2, there's a rule about when the tournament officially starts, and something has to happen first. And so there's a process of getting to that thing happening. And then once it happens, then there's a whole bunch of fighting, and then there's more fighting, and there's more fighting. Like, it's gonna be interesting because like 1 through 5 are all paced in a way where it's like they're pretty back to back. Like, I'm really excited about what it's gonna read like once you read it in a trade, because I think once you end up reading the whole tournament arc story in a trade, I think you'll see how it was paced the whole thing takes place over like, you think 3 days, I think. Like, I think it's maybe 4 days total. The whole arc will take place over a few days, but I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I wanted to get to know the characters and have Damian kind of go through a bit of a story before we get to the main actual tournament and the actual fights. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what does the Robin name mean to Damian?
It's his to take or leave. We play with that in issue 8. We play with that a little bit and what that logo actually means, because he tore the logo off, right? And now he has it back, and we play with it a bit more throughout the book. I mean, there's a reason. I think Glove talked about this online, where it's he has many costumes throughout. We've only shown a few of them. Yeah, like you'll see other stuff as we go and what that means to him and whether or not he continues wearing it across this whole arc. And then we've definitely played with that stuff and how it is his. I didn't want it. It was funny at one point, really, really early on. I did go down a path. This was writing the 0 issue, the 2 preludes that were in Detective and Batman. I went down a whole path of the R meaning something to him, of like, well, now it means rebel and all this stuff. And not offense to those things, what I'm about to say. I realized so many people have already done that. Like, they've already done the R means other things. And I was like, I didn't want to be so literal. I wanted it to be more of a much more symbolic thing. Of it, it's not like the R means a different R word or something, but I wanted to play around with what it means to him. But I think the way he sees it right now is it's like his to give away or take. He can do whatever he wants with it, but gradually his opinion on will change across the issues of what it actually means to him. And I don't know. This book is interesting. There's a lot of talking in it, but a lot of fighting as well. It's like issue 2, he talks to a lot. Issue 3, he talks to Connor a lot. Issue 4, he talks to Rachel a lot. And 5, again, I don't want to say who it is until the cover comes out, but he talks to somebody else, and just kind of this. And he talks to Alfred throughout the stuff. And so, like in issue 1, he was talking to Alfred's ghost and everything. So his guilt manifested, I should say.
So, back to the hard-hitting journalism.
Yes, let's hear
If
it.
you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
A Rube Goldberg machine? I don't know. A Rube Goldberg machine. Hold on. My dog is acting crazy. What do you need, puppy? She's like, it is almost my dinner time. That's what I need. How about that? It's going to be something that feeds my dog and takes care of my dog. That's what I want. That's what I need right now.
That's a good one.
That is a good one.
Well, when can we find the next issue of Robin?
It comes out in June. I actually don't know the date, but I think it's the last week.
And when does
June.
Infinite Frontier start?
Yeah. That starts the second, so almost last week of June as well. I think they both come out on, No, I'm sorry. So issue 2 comes out in May of Robin. Issue 1 of Infinite Frontier comes out, I think it's the 23rd of June, because the Secret Files comes out on the 30th.
And where can people find you online?
The best place to get me is always just Twitter, as you guys have seen. I think that puppy, you're okay, baby. That's the best place to get me is just Williamson _Josh on Twitter. That's right. I'm not on there all the time. I actually have it blocked most of the day, just because I get work done that way. And I schedule most of my tweets. But it is the best place to kind of reach me or see what I'm up to and see the kind of books. And I try to post art occasionally on there. Just talk about exciting stuff about comic books on there.
You can find us at gatecrashers.fan and on Twitter at gatecrasherspod. Again, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great.
It's the Gatecrashers.